Joy was crying before Clara had finished zipping up. "You're not supposed to do that yet," Clara said, watching her in the mirror. "We have 4 hours." "I know." Joy pressed 2 fingers under each eye, careful not to smear anything. You look like yourself, that's all." Clara didn't answer. She looked at her reflection the way she sometimes looked at patients' charts, searching for something that wasn't in the obvious numbers. The dress was simple. Ivory fitted through the waist, nothing trailing behind her. It just fit. That had seemed like enough reason. The bridal suite smelled like Joy's perfume and the coffee going cold on the windowsill. Outside, the garden was being arranged by people Clara had spoken to exactly twice. Thomas had handled most of it. He prepared for things that mattered to her as though they mattered to him. She picked up her earrings from the vanity, small gold hoops, nothing ceremonial. Her mother had suggested pearls. Clara had smiled and said maybe. Joy was watching her in that particular way she had, not quite saying something. "Go ahead," Clara said. "I didn't." "Joy." Joy sat down on the arm of the chair. "I just want to ask how you're actually doing, not bridal suite doing, actually." Clara placed the second earring in, pressed it closed. "I'm good." Joy let it be. She was good at that too, knowing when to stay close without pressing. She crossed the room and straightened the back of Clara's dress where it had shifted, smoothed a place at the shoulder with the flat of her palm. In the mirror, Clara could see her own hands, and for a moment, just a moment, she was somewhere else. A different bathroom, fluorescent light, paper gown, the specific quality of silence in a hospital when you are the one waiting for yourself to be okay. Daniel had texted from the parking garage that he was 5 minutes away. He arrived 23 minutes later. She had filed it, like she filed most things that were too heavy to carry in full view, into that interior space she'd spent years organizing. He wasn't good at that kind of thing. Thomas had come to the second appointment before she asked, had simply appeared in the waiting room when she came out, in the same jacket he'd worn on their 3rd date, holding 2 coffees, saying nothing for a long time. She had cried in the car afterward. He'd driven. "I'm good," she said again, and this time it was true enough. "Thomas is already down there," Joy said. "Matron told me he got there 40 minutes early." "Of course he did," Clara said. She was smiling when the knock came. It was soft, apologetic almost, the knock of someone who wasn't sure they had the right door. One of the venue staff, a young woman in a white shirt, opened it a few inches and leaned in. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," she said. "There's a child at the main gate. She paused, chose her words carefully. "He's asking for someone by name," he said. "Clara Osai." Joy turned first. Probably someone's kid wandered off. But Clara had already gone still. She was looking at the woman in the doorway, and her hands had stopped moving entirely. There are things Clara would only understand later. Not all at once, the way grief rarely arrives complete. In pieces, the way you find things after someone moves out. A coffee mug behind a cabinet. A habit you didn't know you'd borrowed. She would reconstruct Daniel the way a person reconstructs anything they were too close to see clearly while it was happening, slowly, reluctantly, with the particular shame of realizing the evidence had always been there. She would learn that Daniel met Renee at a conference in Houston. March, 4 months before their wedding. She would learn this not from Daniel, but from the timestamps on a document she was never supposed to read, on a phone she was never supposed to hold, in a room she was never supposed to be sitting in. She would learn that Renee called him in October, 6 weeks after Clara and Daniel returned from their honeymoon, that Daniel took the call, that he did not end the marriage, did not tell Clara, did not lose sleep in any way she ever noticed. He made arrangements. He was efficient about it, the kind of man who believed that a problem managed was a problem solved, that clean paperwork was the same as clean hands. The first payment went through in November. Clara had been repainting the hallway that weekend. She remembered because she'd gotten a stripe of the wrong color on her wrist, and Daniel had laughed and helped her scrub it off at the kitchen sink, his hands over hers under the warm water. She would think about that later, the warm water, his hands. The second call from Renee came 18 months into the marriage. A Tuesday in February, Clara knew the date without needing the document to tell her, because it was the morning after she had sat across from Daniel at the kitchen table and told him, in a voice she'd practiced in the car on the way home, that she had lost the pregnancy, that the appointment had confirmed it, that she was okay, she was going to be okay, she just needed him to know. He had reached across the table and covered her hand with his. He had said, "We'll try again." 3 hours later, he was in the parking garage beneath his office building. The transfer went through at 2:47 in the afternoon. Renee never cashed it. She let it sit in a frozen account like something she hadn't decided what to do with, evidence or conscience, or simply the one thing she hadn't been willing to make easy for him. Clara would not know any of this in the bridal suite. She would not know it when she walked to the gate. She would not know it when she crouched down in her wedding dress in front of a small boy in a collared shirt, slightly too big, and asked him his name. But she would know it by evening. She would know it because of an unsent letter 4 years old, sitting in a drafts folder on a stranger's phone, a letter that did not accuse, did not perform outrage, only explained. That said, in handwriting that had been typed and deleted and retyped over several months, "I thought you should know. I thought someone should tell you that you didn't imagine the distance. You weren't imagining it." Renee had written that sentence first. Then she'd written 17 more. Then she'd deleted 15 of them. What remained was plain and careful and more devastating for its plainness. She had never sent it. What stopped her wasn't Daniel. It wasn't fear or money or legal exposure. It was the knowledge, arrived at slowly and honestly, that sending it would relieve Renee's guilt more than it would help Clara. She couldn't find a clean enough reason. The letter stayed in drafts, the account stayed frozen. And in a parking garage on a Tuesday in February, a man drove home to his wife and said nothing, and the nothing accumulated, quietly, for years. The gate was wrought iron, painted white for the occasion, threaded with small flowers that had begun to wilt slightly in the afternoon heat. Clara saw all of this in the specific, slowed-down way you notice details when your mind is buying itself time. The boy was standing just outside it. He was small for 6, or maybe he only seemed that way because of the shirt, a pale blue collared shirt, pressed, slightly too large at the shoulders, the kind of shirt that announced someone had dressed him carefully for something important. He had a small backpack on, the kind with a cartoon on it that Clara couldn't make out from this distance. He was not crying. He was not fidgeting. He was standing with the particular stillness of a child who has decided to be brave and is concentrating on it. In his right hand, he held a piece of paper, folded twice. Clara crossed the courtyard toward him. She was still in her dress. She hadn't thought about that until the gravel shifted under her shoes, and she looked down briefly and then back up. Behind her, she could hear Joy saying something to the venue coordinator, a low practical exchange about whether to call someone. Clara didn't stop walking. She had spent 9 years talking to children in hospitals. Children in pain, children pretending they weren't, children who had been told to be brave so many times they'd forgotten they were allowed not to be. She knew what this kind of stillness cost. She stopped on her side of the gate. He looked up at her. His eyes were Daniel's. She didn't know that yet. She registered them only as serious and watchful and a shade of brown that caught the afternoon light in a way that seemed, for a reason she couldn't locate, familiar. "Hi," she said. "Hi." He looked at her dress, then at her face, with the frank assessment of someone who hadn't yet learned to pretend he wasn't looking. "You're prettier in person," he said. Something in Clara's chest moved. "Thank you," she said. "What's your name?" He considered this briefly, as though confirming he still knew the answer. "Marcus." "Marcus," she kept her voice the same. level warm, unhurried, the voice she used on the ward when a child needed to believe the person in front of them was not afraid. "How did you get here, Marcus?" He lifted the folded paper slightly, the way you hold up a ticket. "I copied the address from my mum's phone." He said it plainly, with the quiet pride of someone who had solved a difficult problem. "She showed me a picture once of the lady in the wedding dress." He glanced at Clara's dress again. "She didn't say it was going to be today." Clara opened the gate, not wide, just enough. She crouched down to his level, the dress gathering against the gravel, and looked at him directly. He didn't step back. "Where's your mum now?" she said. "Hospital," he said it without distress, the way children state facts they've been told to accept. "She said Dad was coming to get me, but he didn't come, so I came here instead." Behind Clara, Joy had gone quiet. Clara looked at the paper in his hand. The address was written in large, effortful letters, a child's careful copy, each character slightly different in size, the kind of handwriting that required full concentration. He had done this alone. He had held this paper across however far he had traveled and had not lost it. "Can I sit with you for a little while?" Clara said, "while we find your dad?" Marcus thought about it. Then he nodded once and held out the paper to her, not to give it away, just to show her, the way children show you the thing that got them somewhere. She was standing at a gate in her wedding dress, looking at a 6-year-old boy with her ex-husband's jaw, thinking a thought she cannot yet finish. They put Marcus in the garden room. It was a small space off the main corridor, used for storage, mostly folding chairs stacked against one wall, a table with a water pitcher, 2 armchairs that didn't match. Someone had brought a plate of fruit that Marcus looked at and didn't touch. He sat in the larger armchair with his backpack on his lap and looked at the door every time someone passed in the hallway outside. Clara sat across from him. Thomas had been told. She didn't know exactly what Joy had said, but she could imagine. Joy was precise under pressure, practical, the kind of friend who delivered difficult information without editorializing. Thomas had sent one text. It said, "Take the time you need, I'm here." Clara had read it twice and put her phone face down on the table. She and Marcus talked, in the way she knew how to talk to children, sideways, without pressure. He told her about his school, about a boy named Kofi who had broken his pencil case and not apologized. He told her that his mother made very good rice but not very good eggs. He said this as a statement of fact, balanced, fair to all parties. Clara listened. She refilled his water glass when it emptied. She did not look at the door. He was asleep within 20 minutes. It happened the way it always happened with young children past their threshold. One moment present, the next simply gone, head tilted against the armchair wing, the backpack still held loosely in his lap. Clara sat with him for a moment in the quiet. Then she picked up the venue coordinator's phone from the table. The woman had left it for her to try reaching Renee's emergency contacts, her own phone charger left at home in the rush of the morning. The phone was unlocked. Clara found the recent calls, located Renee's name, found the emergency contact listed in the notes below it. She called the number. It rang out. She tried once more. Then she set the phone down and looked at it. The drafts folder icon sat at the bottom of the screen. She wasn't looking for anything. Her thumb moved before she decided to move it. There was one draft, composed 4 years ago, never sent. The recipient field had Clara's name in it, her old email address, the one she'd stopped using after the divorce. Renee had known it from somewhere. A school alumni list, a work directory, something that no longer mattered. Clara read it. It wasn't long. Renee had written it and cut it down, and what remained was sparse, almost formal, the language of someone who had chosen every word carefully and removed every word that was there for her own relief. There was no accusation. There was no self-defense. There was one paragraph about the facts, laid out plainly with the dates. There was one paragraph about the second payment, that she hadn't cashed it, that she didn't know what she was saving it for, that she wanted Clara to know it existed. And then the last two sentences, which were not about Daniel at all. I thought you should know. I thought someone should tell you that you didn't imagine the distance. You weren't imagining it. Clara read those two sentences 3 times. She put the phone face down on the table. She sat for a moment with her hands in her lap, in her wedding dress, in a storage room with mismatched armchairs and a plate of untouched fruit. Marcus slept. His breathing was slow and even. The backpack had slipped slightly in his loosened grip, and the folded paper, still there, creased now from a full afternoon of being held and offered and held again, had worked its way out of the front pocket and sat at the edge of the armchair cushion, one corner bent. Clara looked at it. She stood, she smoothed her dress in the way she had smoothed it that morning, a reflex, her hands moving over fabric that had somehow survived the day intact. She picked up her own phone from the table. Then she walked to the door, opened it quietly so as not to wake him, and moved back down the corridor toward the ceremony. She made a decision. The reader doesn't yet know what it is. The ceremony was 40 minutes late. Nobody explained this to the guests. The chairs had been arranged in 2 short rows facing a trellis strung with white flowers, and the people sitting in them, 14 in total, family mostly, 2 friends from Clara's ward, waited with the particular patience of people who trusted the couple enough not to require an explanation. Thomas was standing at the trellis when Clara came through the garden door. He saw her, and his face did the thing it did, not a performance, just a change, the way a room changes when a window opens. He didn't mouth anything. He didn't gesture. He simply adjusted his weight slightly, squared his shoulders, and waited for her to reach him. Oh, she did. The ceremony was short. They had written their own vows, and both of them had kept them brief. Thomas went first, and what he said was plain and accurate and nothing he hadn't already demonstrated. Clara spoke for 2 minutes. She did not cry. At one point she paused, not from emotion, but from the particular sense of arriving somewhere after a long drive, of needing a moment to accept that the road had actually ended. The officiant pronounced them married at 4:20. Afterward, before the reception began, Clara found a corner of the garden where the caterers hadn't set up yet. She called Daniel. He answered on the 3rd ring. She could hear the ambient noise of wherever he was, voices, a television, the texture of a Saturday afternoon undisturbed. Clara, surprised, carefully neutral. She didn't match his tone. She didn't need to. Your son was at my wedding today, she said. He came alone. He copied an address from his mother's phone, and he traveled alone, and he sat in a storage room and fell asleep in a chair waiting for someone to collect him. She let that land. Renee is in the hospital. He told me you were supposed to come. The silence that followed was not the silence of a man who had nothing to say. It was the silence of a man who had spent 6 years arranging his life, so he would never have to have this conversation, and was now having it anyway, on the day he least expected it, called to account not by a lawyer or a confrontation or anything he could have managed in advance. Called by the woman he had underestimated, on her wedding day, in a garden, in a dress, with 14 guests waiting inside. All his arrangements had produced exactly this. I'm going to need you to be his father, Clara said. Not for me, not even for Renee. He's 6 years old and he showed up somewhere alone today because you didn't fix that. She hung up. She stood in the garden for a moment. Above her, the sky had shifted into early evening, that specific blue that exists for 20 minutes before it darkens entirely. Somewhere behind her joy was laughing, that specific laugh that filled a room from its edges. Thomas would be looking for her soon, not from worry, but from the simple habit of wanting to know she was near. She went back inside. 6 months later, on a Tuesday evening, Thomas was looking for a pen in Clara's bedside drawer. She heard him from the bathroom, the soft rummage of someone searching without urgency. Then it went quiet. She came out and he was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding the folded paper between 2 fingers. It had softened at the creases from months of sitting still. The ink was slightly worn where small hands had gripped it. The address was still legible, each letter large and effortful, the handwriting of a child who had concentrated very hard to get somewhere. Thomas held it up. "What's this?" Clara looked at it for a moment. A 6-year-old boy had done what no adult in this story had managed. He hadn't calculated. He hadn't negotiated. He hadn't drafted something and left it unsent for 4 years. He had copied an address, letter by letter, folded the paper carefully, put it in his pocket, and gone. The truth had arrived not because someone finally found the courage to tell it. It had arrived because a child didn't know yet that he was supposed to stay quiet. "A reminder," she said. Thomas looked at her. He didn't ask of what. That was the thing about him. He understood that some things belonged to her, and he never tried to make them his. She took the paper gently from his hand. She folded it once along its original crease. The fold Marcus had made, not her, and set it back in the drawer. She didn't frame it. She didn't throw it away. Some things you keep not because they're precious, but because they're true.